Welcome to Drawing 1 and 2. So this video is an introduction for Drawing 1 and 2 students to the class that you're going to take this summer. And all the work in the video is going to be work produced in my class in the last few years. As we go through it, a lot of the work is pretty good. In some cases, it's very good. And the last thing I want to do is take a student who's new to drawing and intimidate them into thinking they can't do these things. The reason we're doing this video is so that you can see what you're going to be capable of, or at least on some level capable of, as we move through the semester. So the intro screen here is a sketchbook page, and I'll get more sketchbook stuff in a minute. But the second image is a final project, and I thought I would sort of start off with a slightly higher level kind of thing, because a drawing that is fully shaded and realistic and has all those characteristics, when you think about taking a drawing class, that's pretty much what you expect would be to come out of a drawing class, being able to do shadows and shading and all that kind of stuff. And that is what you'll get. But at the same time, there are some things we have to do first in order to get you ready. If we started with shading, the beginning student just sort of drowns in the amount of information that's there. So I like to go through the beginning of the class relatively slow and work our way through basic skills. So the next image is an early shaded drawing, and I wanted to compare that to the first one. It's not the best drawing that anyone's done in my class, but it's solid. It's doing basically everything right. But it's another nice example of a shaded drawing. But we should probably start with where you guys are going to start. So this page of ellipses is not a student drawing. It's actually a demo drawing that I did, that I made a video of, that you guys will see soon enough. But we start with basic shapes and basic volumes, and then we build from there. One of the exercises that we like to do, once you've learned 1 and 2 point perspective, and if you've heard of those things, or if you've had them in a class in the past, or you've read a book that dealt with those things, that's good, but you don't need to know anything about it in order to get started. So once we go through a week of just figuring 1 and 2 point perspective out, everybody does a project where one of the main projects for the week is going to be designing a maze in 2 point perspective. So 2 point perspective, and we can look at this maze as an example. It's when one corner is closer to you than any of the other ones, and then the angles go off to the sides. And this one's a pretty solidly drawn one. It makes an attempt to bring a circle into the center, which is good. That's something I'll show you too. And you can see it doesn't even need to be solvable. It's an exercise in consistency. And then we move to the next one. This was somebody who, while they were doing it, they were having a hard time keeping track of the different directions that their passages went through. So they started putting some shading in there. And I actually asked people not to do that at the beginning, because I want you to focus on the lines and the quality of the lines and the consistency and sort of the sense making that those lines are for. But this one turned out pretty good. So the next slide is, this is actually a drawing 2 student. This was their maze, so they built it up as big shapes, and then they turned their big sort of geometric shapes into roller coasters and beehives and buses and this sort of carnival. Amusement park image. And I include it in the slideshow because it's a great example of how the mechanical means that we start with to draw can turn into whatever you need it to turn into. And that's you know, sometimes when you're learning to draw, it doesn't feel very creative because you're basically looking at things and recording what you're seeing. But drawings like this remind you that creativity is always there. So the next one, the next big project that we tend to work on is very similar to the maze, but what we do is we sort of design a board game in 2-point perspective, and then you guys draw the board out, you draw the pieces, you draw the cards, you do the lettering, whatever, and it's another example of making 2-point perspective work in a creative sense so that you guys see what it's for. And the board in this drawing is really good, but if you look at the card boxes on the sides, they're not in the same perspective as the board, and that's something we're trying to make sure people get right. When we move to the next one, this was somebody in drawing 2 that was doing their board game, and they designed it as like a Halo board game. And you, even though the hexagons, I think they're hexagons that are making up the board, even though they're hexagons, it actually starts out as a rectangle. And then you can see the towers. Like once you get going with this perspective stuff, you can build a board and you could go up, you can go down into the board, you can go off to the sides, you can break it up into smaller, more complex things. Lots of cool stuff is possible. So each student in the class is going to have a sketchbook for the semester. And these drawings, I'll move through them kind of quickly. They're nice examples of sketchbook drawings. So there's the one from the intro page or intro slide where the person is just making a study of a staircase. And then we have some cylinders and perspective and some ideas about the maze in the next one. And then one of the students set up 2 mirrors and drew themselves with a ballpoint pen from behind. If you need to get multiple, like a view that isn't straight on in a mirror, you use 2 mirrors and you could do profiles, whatever you want. So they did this view of the back of their head, and they just had these wonderful braids and did a really great job of just making a study of all the knots and things. One of the things that we are sort of mandated to do in drawing 2 is integrate ink. When the drawing 1 and 2 classes were set up and the courses were written back in the 1960s, the people who started our program here at the University of South Alabama decided that drawing 1 would be dry media and drawing 2 would be wet media. And that's okay with me. I have a tendency to focus more on the dry media because it's a lot more forgiving and it allows students to focus on the things that they need to be thinking about and not necessarily always be struggling against a new material. I'm not big on every time you make a new drawing using a new material. I like to stick with a couple things that you guys get really good at, and then you can transition to whatever you want. But what I wanted to say about the ink drawings is that for those of you in drawing 2, I want you to engage in using pens and ink wash and watercolor, maybe gouache, whatever you guys want to use to whatever degree you're interested in it. If the wet media stuff doesn't really interest you, we'll just make sure we do one or two things and then we'll focus on fundamentals. But we have a couple really nice examples of ink drawing here that work particularly well. And then the last image is one of the other homeworks that we do. Once we get to shading, I have a couple shading projects. The last shading project we do is I have you guys go and take a look in your closet and draw the challenge that you see in your closet, and sometimes it results in you guys cleaning your closets or redefining what a closet is. I've had people draw chairs with clothes draped over them. I've had people draw utility closets, places where tools are kept, mud rooms, things like that. And the idea is that you're dealing with space and scale and perspective in a way that maybe we haven't dealt with in the earlier parts of the semester. So that's that. I hope that we set you up with some levels of quality to shoot for, and at the same time help you realize that these are a lot of what you saw in this slideshow are things that you're going to be able to do in a very short period of time. But the thing with drawing is that you have to be patient. You're not just going to be awesome at it right off the bat. You're going to have to make your mistakes. You're going to throw a lot of drawings away. But that's what it's all about.